of the Plan Commission on December 7th. We are appearing by video. Commission members present would be myself, Shane Blazer, Jay Bemke, Susan Feith, and Shane Burkhart. Our first item on the agenda is the approval of the report from November 16th, 2020 Plan Commission meeting. And what is your wishes?
Move for approval.
We have a motion by Feith, seconded by Bemke to approve the prior meeting from November 16th. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Item number 2 is Plan -20-0994. Is it Verret Real Estate LP? Request for a sign exception of the 25% to the bulk regulations for wall canopy signs and a freestanding sign at 2130 8th Street South, parcel ID 3412136. Kyle?
Thank you. All right. Everyone should be able to see my screen. I'm going to use a presentation today that I may hope to do every Plan Commission meeting, just because it helps you visualize what's going on here and summarize the staff report. It may make meetings a little bit longer, but hopefully you're able to make a better informed decision. With regards to this request, it's a unique one that likely doesn't come up very often, but it is a result of an applicant wanting to pursue a signage change at an existing service station. It's changing from a Shell to an Amoco. And the canopy signs that they've proposed, as well as the freestanding sign, which is non-conforming, exceed the requirements. So the canopy signs exceed the size requirements, and the proposed freestanding sign, which is non-conforming, would lose its non-conforming status and would then need to meet the existing, or meet the 5-foot setback. And so they cannot do that. And so there's a part of our code that allows for them to request a 25% exception to the bulk regulations. In this case, the bulk regulations can be size as well as setback. So on the screen, you'll see kind of the review of the items that I just went over. It's important to note that wall signs shall not exceed 15% of the wall face, which they are attached, and freestanding signs shall be set back 5 feet from the property line. And looking at their proposed request, you can see here that they're requesting 3 canopy signs, one at 24 square feet, one at about 30, or 2 at 30. And again, on the presentation, you'll see the request and then what 15% amounts to. Again, 15% being the most that they could pursue based on the wall area. And you can see that they're exceeding that requirement. So for example, the wall sign on the east, they've got 24.29 square feet, but they're only allowed 18.975. So again, all 3 of those are exceeding the amount, hence the reason for the request for the exception. Moving on to the freestanding sign. Again, there was an existing freestanding sign. They have elected to remove the existing cabinets on the sign. And in doing so, it loses its non-conforming status. So now the non-conforming sign that did not meet the setback must meet the 5-foot setback. They're claiming that given the site parameters and the existing canopy and the drive aisles and the gas tanks and so forth, that they can't meet that setback and install an appropriate sign. So they are requiring an exception to that proposed setback. I do want to note that the canopy signs have already been installed, and they have just placed a vinyl graphic over the existing freestanding sign. This is, or these are some photos of what's currently out there. So again, you can see that the Amico signs on the canopy are installed, but they have not necessarily made the changes to the freestanding sign. The existing freestanding sign you can see is a two-pole design. It has two support poles. What they are requesting is that the new sign have one support pole, and then the signs essentially become a projecting sign. They project off of that one support pole, and the renderings are part of the packet if you want to reference the changes that are being made. With regards to staff's review, we feel as though that from a wall sign perspective, it seems appropriate to allow for an exception to increase the size 25% on each canopy sign, with the primary reason being that that canopy serves as essentially an extension of the front of their building, right? So they've got their service station set back, which has a larger facade area because of the entryway and so forth. But because the canopy sits in front of it, the canopy kind of serves as the front of the building. And I think it is appropriate in that instance to allow for that exception because that canopy is much narrower. It's not obviously as big as the front of the convenience store building, and they do not have any signage on the front of the convenience store. So it does make sense to approve the exception to the canopy sign, a canopy sign increase, and staff would recommend doing so. With regards to the freestanding sign, again, when you look at the site, it's pretty much entirely built out. It's really a grandfathered site. They've got parking and/or drive aisles pretty much extending to the curb. They've got the underground gas tanks to the north, and they've got a drive-through essentially to circulate vehicles in one ingress through the site, through the canopy, to another egress to exit, and vice versa. And then there's a small landscaped area that exists along the street. And this really, without significantly changing the egress, this really is the only applicable area where they can, place signage for it to, have a purpose, so to speak. And this area is limited. I believe it's about a little over 9 feet wide. So if they were to meet the 5-foot setback, they could only have approximately 4 foot sign. And with the pole being, anywhere from 10 to 12 inches, that leaves about 3 feet. So certainly I feel as though this exception is appropriate as well to give them a little bit larger sign area. Again, this would ultimately take the sign from non-conforming as it currently is to conforming with the exception. So ultimately we are getting conformance with regards to this exception. And therefore we would recommend approval of both the canopy and the freestanding signs with the conditions that you see there. They are not necessarily requesting a 3.75 feet setback from the property line, but again, that's what 25% is. And I think it's appropriate to give them the leeway to do that. I believe they're actually requesting a 4.25 foot setback. But in doing the math, I didn't get that same calculation. So I would recommend approving that maximum 25 foot or 25% reduction, which amounts to 3.75 feet from the property line. Secondly, again, allowing for the wall canopy signs to be increased by 25%, which means that it shouldn't exceed 33 square feet on the north and south canopy. And I think I have that wrong, actually, that 18.75. It should be, let me see. It should be 23.71 on what would amount to the east and west side of the canopy. And then obviously they need to pull applicable permits and meet other applicable standards. With that, again, staff would recommend approval.
Thank you, Kyle. Do any commissioners have any questions?
This is Shane. Looking through the information there, they're proposing a larger sign on the east at 24.29. And so we're not approving we're approving up to this 23. So they're going to have to alter what they're changing or what they're proposing?
That is correct.
Okay.
To my understanding, yes, their sign that's currently up there that's not in compliance would not still be in compliance if granted the 25% increase. They would have to shrink that sign down. Yep. And again, we would likely not issue the sign permit until we've received an updated rendering identifying the appropriate size of those signs.
Thank you, Shane. Any other commissioners have any questions? Hearing none. What are your wishes?
I think
to approve the exception for the well canopy sign and for the setback. So we have a motion by Bemke to approve the request for the.
second from Burkhart.
Thank you, Shane. So a motion and a second.
Unmuted. You can mute or unmute yourself.
Are we picking up? Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the item as presented with the 25% exception to the wall and canopy signs and the freestanding signs. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. 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 Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Next item, item 3 is community plan 20-0720 Community Development Department action on a request to amend the zoning code, chapter 11 of the municipal code to modify the secondary review requirements for uses. Kyle.
Thank you. So this is an item that's been delayed for about 2 months. It first came before you, I believe, in October. And there was some hesitation for a couple reasons. And the Plan Commission cited that they wanted it to be brought back with a little bit more description and time to review. So after that meeting, I had sent out the procedural standards for site plan review, architectural review, and plan of operations review, as well as the standards of review to provide some more information and some context. I also made a few tweaks to the staff memo, but now I will also be walking through this for you and giving you a little bit of history and helping you understand the process, which I think is good overall as plan commissioners to know how we intake requests and how we act upon those requests prior to them getting on an agenda for plan commission. Because this may be a little more lengthy, if you have questions, feel free to interject. I will do my best to be as quick as possible. But again, I want to make sure you have a lot of information. So with regards to the history, the item really stemmed from some interest for improving efficiency and reviewing projects, development projects, whether that's new construction or additions, basically in any sort of development within the city. And right now, the majority of all development, aside from single family homes or duplexes, requires some sort of secondary review. When I say secondary review, it typically involves having Plan Commission review the item and act on the item, and then Common Council acting on Plan Commission's recommendation. The recent developer examples that I will cite are the Culver's edition that came before you at a special meeting in November. Prior to that, we had the optical clinic, the coffee shop, and there have been others that have received site plan review as well. Those are just a few recent examples. And again, I already mentioned that the Plan Commission performs this secondary review, which is in addition to the internal review that staff is performing as well. So when staff writes a memo, they've already looked at the zoning code and the applicable standards of review in the zoning code and basically outline them for you in a memo. The other thing I'll note with regards to the secondary review is throughout my presentation, I'll cite some positives and negatives with the secondary review. I've cited some already. One of the big ones is, it allows for the public to have a forum to provide comment, to provide feedback. While the noticing requirements might not always be the same, dependent upon the action item. If it's on an agenda, it basically gives the public or the neighbors an opportunity to be heard and for their comments to be recorded. However, again, scheduling a meeting, trying to find a quorum for a meeting, as we recently did with the Culver's edition, the staff time is somewhat burdensome in that aspect when we're trying to meet different deadlines and be accommodating to the developers. And so it can sometimes cause project delays and frustration amongst developers and does take up additional staff time also. Overall, the zoning, right? Every property has a certain zoning classification, and that zoning determines the nature of the use. And when I say nature, typically most municipalities, they separate uses by a permitted use and a conditional use. Permitted uses are by right, and you see I define it there in our zoning code. And then conditional uses are uses that have a unique character or circumstance that may require additional conditions of approval because of their unique nature. Right. This could be, manufacturing uses that have high truck traffic or pollution. There may be conditions that we may want to place above them beyond the normal zoning code requirements, and those are identified as conditional uses, typically within all zoning codes throughout the country. We, in our zoning code, have that secondary review beyond permitted uses and conditional uses. We take it a step further where, again, we identify that in addition to a permitted use, you have other architectural review standards, site plan standards, plan of operation standards that still have to go through the plan commission as well. Even though they're not a conditional use, there's still that review. And that's somewhat uncommon in reviewing surrounding municipalities. Madison is one that does have those secondary review requirements, but Stevens Point is one that doesn't, that comes to mind. Again, most of them utilize the conditional use and the permitted use separation as a way to determine what types of reviews are required. The other thing that triggers review in zoning codes are overlay districts. Many communities have airport height overlay districts, historic districts, wellhead protection districts, and floodplain districts. And those are always looked at whenever we receive a development request to see if there's additional review beyond the normal review, as it were. I also want to note that we do have, safeguards in place regarding the reduction of incompatibilities amongst uses, right? So if, for example, you have a restaurant use that's permitted by right in a commercial district that's adjacent to a residential district, there are some standards in place that recognize that unique situation and require additional standards to be implemented. And the one I'll cite is buffer yards, right? So if you're a commercial use and you buffer a residential use, you have to put in a larger buffer yard to create separation and to create that buffer between those two incompatible uses. Those are built into the code. They're not necessarily things that Plan Commission has to recommend above and beyond the normal recommendations. The other thing are lighting standards. The lighting standards somewhat differ dependent upon what uses and zoning districts border those properties. The point I'm trying to make here is that there are built-in standards that identify these uniquenesses amongst incompatible uses. Again, incompatibilities being commercial next to residential or residential next to manufacturing. And these do exist throughout the community quite frequently, actually. 8th Street is probably the most common location where you have commercial that's backed or that's in front of residential as you get further from the major thoroughfare. Does anyone have any questions at this point? All right, so I'll move on. So when we receive a request for a development, the first thing we do is we look to see if we can tie it to an existing use, or I'm sorry, not an existing use, if we can tie it to a use within the use table within the zoning code. The example that I'm going to use in this instance is restaurant. So you can see on the left side of the screen, which is somewhat cut off there. Let me see if I can. Actually, no, I think can you guys see the entirety? Yeah, I think you can. You'll see the restaurant falls under food and beverage sales. And then at the top, right, so you essentially have a row at the top, or a column at the left side, a row at the top. So you go down the left side, find the use, restaurant, and then you look at where it's permitted or conditional within the zoning districts. At the top are the zoning districts. RR stands for the residential rural district, R1, the single family district, R2, the mixed district, R3, and R4 multifamily, and so on. Then you get into the B districts, with B1 being your downtown, B2 your general commercial, I'm sorry, B1 your neighborhood, then B3 is your downtown. Then you get into your manufacturing district. So again, I've blown up the restaurant here. Not literally, obviously, in the photo. You'll see that it's permitted. The P stands for permitted and the C stands for conditional. It's permitted in the B1 district and it's permitted in the B2 district, and it's conditional in the B5 district. Where you see a dash, that means it's prohibited in the remaining districts. You'll see in the middle a column for secondary review. That means, again, that there's additional review required beyond the normal standards and the internal review of the zoning code. And you've got some acronyms here. The AR stands for architectural review. The SP stands for site plan review. The PO stands for plan of operations review. And the ZP simply stands for a zoning permit. We issue zoning permits really encompassed within a building permit after all of the other plan reviews have occurred. So in this case, again, you can see, if you reference on the left here, a majority of uses require, and this is just one page of the 5-page use table, but a majority of uses require these secondary review requirements. So basically, we are, aside from single family and duplexes, we are requiring a secondary review for a majority of our uses within the zoning code. Once we identify what reviews are in place, we follow up with the developer and provide them an application for them to fill out. We have a site plan, an architectural plan review, and a plan of operations application that they complete. Those applications then are submitted to our office for review, and they submit the fee, and then we place them on the next agenda item to be reviewed. Obviously, I do a pretty thorough review in my staff memos. Now, one other thing we do before we put the agenda out is to reference this chart. This is in the zoning code. This is the notice that's required for different uses. So on the left column, you'll see we've got about 19 different actionable items that Plan Commission reviews here. This ranges from code amendments, to zoning map amendments, to rezonings, to non-conforming uses, variances, conditional uses. You'll see site plan and plan of operation architectural review all fall number 5 and number 6 here. And if you follow them over here, this is the type of notice that we provide for all of the different uses. Class 1 notice means that you have one circulation in the newspaper, the city newspaper, or whatever newspaper selected annually to be the city newspaper, noticing that this item is being pursued by an applicant and identifying potentially a public hearing notice. Class 2 means you've got to post it in the paper twice. Property owner notice means that we notice individuals within 300 feet surrounding the property. They get a letter from our office identifying that at an upcoming date that's identified, the applicant will pursue whatever the action item is that's required. Then we have a distribution list notice. And then obviously a majority of them require a meeting agenda, meaning that Plan Commission has to act on the item. Here you can see that site plan and plan of operation architectural review does not require any class 2 or property owner notice. All it requires is the meeting agenda. And that's what we've been doing up to this point, is simply the meeting agenda. When we receive a site plan or plan of operation or architectural review, we also follow the standards of review, the procedures outlined. Those procedures, again, I referenced early on, were provided to you in an email, and they're pretty lengthy. They basically identify what the applicant is going to do when they apply. It goes into great detail on the standards of review, and then it has the basis of the decision that the Plan Commission should take into consideration. And this basis is really what I outline in my staff memos. So the example I'm citing here on the screen is the basis of decision for a site plan request. And you can see that there are 7 items here. These code references in the later items refer to, the parking lot standards, architectural standards, and obviously there are a number of other standards that come into play with regards to landscaping, buffer yards, lighting requirements. But it also notes a few things on 1, 2, and 3 regarding effects of the project on traffic safety and efficiency. And so, that review really comes from our engineering department when we forward them any changes to accessibility on the site, ingress, egress, and they will comment to make sure that proper circulation is occurring in and out of the site and isn't going to create a safety concern in the right of way. Number 2, again, gets into effects of the project on the natural environment. This can be looked at a few different ways. An example I'll use is one in which a wetland setback came into play for the coffee shop on 8th Street when there was a creek going through. I think there was for Culver's as well. So again, taking into consideration the environment and the development's effect on the environment. Number 3 is again more subjective. It's again effects of the project on surrounding properties. We can look at a few things there. We can look at the comprehensive plan to see what the comprehensive plan identifies for the property and the surrounding properties. The other way, obviously, that we can get some feedback on that is to, again, invite the public to comment or at least allow the public to comment on it. Aside from having a plan commission meeting, our office is always open. Anyone can come in and provide comment if they're aware of a project. And while it's pretty rare, it does sometimes happen. More so somebody gets wind of a project and they call our office and want more information about it. And then we provide them the information. Moving on, as you know, staff was tasked with trying to improve the efficiencies and kind of streamline the review process for certain uses, given that all 150 approximate uses within the use table require that secondary review. So we took a thorough look at some of those uses that we thought maybe didn't require that secondary review at the Plan Commission level. And we made that recommendation within the memo. There are a couple options for moving forward. One, I think first you need to determine whether or not it seems appropriate to pursue, improving the efficiencies. Or do we want to maintain, the secondary review for all of the uses listed within the existing use table currently? Again, there's value in keeping it as it is. And there's a lot of benefits, but I think there's also some benefits to try to streamline the process and improve that efficiency. So again, you can pursue no change if you want to maintain it as it is. You can amend certain permitted uses Again, where secondary review is not needed, as I've recommended. I think there are 59 different uses that I've recommended where we could allow just staff review of the same thing, but just not taking it to the Plan Commission for review. A third option that I allude to at the end of the memo is you could reclassify all uses within the zoning code and clearly identify those permitted versus conditional. Right now we have, for example, restaurants as a permitted use, but if we don't want to keep that secondary review, we could potentially just convert restaurants to a conditional use because we cite their unique nature. Maybe the uniqueness is that they're open late in the late hours. They've got large parking lots that have large overhead lighting. They've got large signage. And so maybe that's the unique nature of the use, and we could possibly reclassify them as conditional, requiring to go through the conditional use permit process. Keep in mind, I am not recommending any changes to the conditional use permit process or recommending any changes to the permitted nature or conditional nature of those uses. It is an option, though, if you wanted to pursue in the future, if you don't want to pursue my recommendation or no change at all. The last one, which is to pursue perhaps a less intense amendment, and the example I'll use is to maybe allow staff to review any additions or renovations to existing buildings where the use is existing. And this would mean that, for example, the Culver's approval just a few weeks ago would not have come to Plan Commission because it was an existing use that was just expanding with an addition. So again, those are a few options that you can pursue. Again, my recommendation is to simplify some of the secondary review and remove 59 of the uses from needing that secondary review at the Plan Commission level. They'll still need that secondary review internally. That process will not change, but they would not have to go to Plan Commission. The other thing I will note is there's several unique circumstances where Plan Commission review is still required. One of which is, for example, putting more than I think it's 35% of your parking in the front of the building. We've had a few recently that have required that or requested that. Those would still have to come to Plan Commission, and any other standards or unique circumstances where Plan Commission is specifically identified within the zoning code. So I'm not recommending any amendments or changes to those specific instances. Simply these uses that you see on the page here would not necessarily, again, need that secondary review. I did make a mistake. Tourist rooming houses, I do want to call out, it's only a conditional use. I thought it was permitted in one of the districts. So I would not recommend removing the secondary review for tourist rooming houses because they are only conditional uses. They're no way allowed via permitted right in any of the zoning codes. And that's one way I looked at these standards or these uses as well, is that anywhere that they were permitted, even if it was only in one zoning district, and I felt as though it wasn't a use that warranted secondary review, I would include them in the list. If they were only a conditional use in all the, in any or all the districts, I did not include them here because the conditional use permit process is much more unique and has a separate set of standards and review criteria. And through the conditional use permit process, you also have a site plan review and architectural process. So the conditional use permit process is more all-encompassing than just the secondary architectural review, site plan, and plan of operations. This is just another recommendation that if you pursue adopting this amendment, we would have to amend Division 5 and Division 6, as well as the use table to clarify which uses, which 59 uses do not need that secondary review. And again, you'll see the recommendation within the packet with the asterisks next to the use on pages. Let's see. It would be pages 29 through 34 of the packet. So again, those uses that I'm recommending would not need secondary review, would not have an asterisk. Those that still would have secondary review have an asterisk placed next to them. With that being said, I would recommend approval as I identified and provided more detail in the staff memo. I apologize again if I've confused you more, and I'll open it up for questions because I'm sure there are several.
Any commissioners have any questions off the bat?
I'm going to ask for, this is Susan Shane.
Yep.
I have comments, but no questions at the present time.
Okay, if you we can open it to comments also.
Okay. I'd like to preface it by saying that I am well aware of the capabilities and appreciate all of the work that the staff does to put together a packet that comes to Planning Commission for review. I think, Kyle, you've been incredibly thorough and good about taking a look at all of the cases that we've handled since I've been on the commission lately. So putting that out there, this has really nothing to do with the capability of staff or the trust that I would put in staff as a commissioner. But what I am concerned about is the lack of a public forum, which is, in my estimation, a really important thing and something that we in this community have always worked with. I think I was on Zoning Board of Appeals and obviously have been on the other side of a lot of the commissions and so forth in working through things that we've done in the community. So to me, it's really important to allow the public to be given notice, to be able to see the site plan, and to be able to make public comment. And if we were to remove these 59 items from Planning Commission review, there's not much possibility that a normal person in a normal day's activities would see it. But once it becomes subject to open meeting laws, the public can, if they have the desire, take a look at the package, and then they can come to the meeting and they can make comment. Doesn't mean that anything will change necessarily, but I think that dialogue between the developer and the surrounding taxpayer landowners is an important factor of why Planning Commission exists. And I would hope that there could be some balance between those things that we could streamline and that ability for the public to get public notice and to have some venue where they can make public comment.
This is Tom Bright. I would agree with that, and I think we did have a rather lively discussion about 4 months ago where we had the apartment complex going up, and I think there was one other project, and I think we had the full council chambers pretty much filled with people. So I guess my question in this would be, how many public or people from the community would need to approach Kyle's office and say, we've got exceptions to this before it would go to this committee? And or secondly, how many exceptions? And almost every deal we have, there's exceptions, just like the one here where we needed the 25%. There's always exceptions to everyone, even though there's a recommendation. If we have one or two exceptions, I understand that, and Kyle works it out and it gets all taken care of. But if we have 5 or 6 or 7, I mean, what is the tipping point where we say maybe we should take this to committee?
So to answer your question, any exception typically requires plan commission review in the zoning code, aside from a variance. So again, in most cases where exceptions are allowed, it's plan commission that's going to be acting and making a recommendation to approve those exceptions. So there'd be no changes to those exceptions. So for example, if there was, if a restaurant did not need secondary review, and the zoning code was amended to allow staff to internally review the project, if they still needed or wanted to put 50% of their parking out front, even though they don't need secondary review, they would still have to come to plan commission to ask for that parking exception to be able to put 50% of their parking up front. But again, that's with the recommendation as I've made, you know, that those 59 uses wouldn't need the secondary review. So again, I thank you, Susan, for the comment. I do agree that there's a lot of value to you know, having the public be able to comment and documenting the request and you know, creating a forum essentially for the information to be stored. And even if it's, you know, somebody that misses the meeting, it's a way to get the information out there. And there's value to kind of sharing the developments throughout the community. But again, on the flip side, the downside can also be that projects are delayed, and sometimes, you know, not always can it be more burdensome to staff, right? We've been doing this and we have the staff to do it. It's more burdensome when you've got requests, you know, such as the Culvers that, you know, came in late and we're butting up against the frost season here. And then we kind of drop everything to try to get a quorum and write a quick memo and review the documents and push it out. And then obviously have Plan Commission act on that. But that's okay. That's what we're here to do. That's why we have a zoning code. And, you know, again, understand that, you know, I personally see benefits to what we have now. And I certainly see benefits to trying to streamline the process as well.
Go ahead, Susan.
Just, I see the role of the Planning Commission as, I mean, we really rely on the expertise, the credentials, the engineering, all of that is administrative department work that happens at the city level. But the whole idea of Planning Commission in my mind is not so much to make these engineering decisions, but it is to create this public forum that gives taxpayers the ability to voice their opinions, ask their questions. They may go away totally dissatisfied, but at least we are that body that provides that venue for them to interact and to learn about something and to state their opinion about something. And it's as important as making those architectural and engineering decisions, I think.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So this is a question for Kyle or for Shane possibly, but I still believe there's going to be time for public comment in this because it's still going to have to be approved. The minutes or the action of this commission is going to have to be approved by the council. Is that correct?
Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, but the action of the Planning Commission is a final action. The council doesn't it merely adopt the Plan Commission report?
Yeah, Plan Commission is a recommending body to Common Council, unless otherwise stated within the zoning code. There are certain things that we can, in our zoning code, we can we can allow Plan Commission to have final action on, but for the most part, they're a recommending body to Common Council. However, you've got to recognize that if the amendment that I've recommended is approved, there are 59 uses that wouldn't have to go to Plan Commission for review. Essentially, internal review would only occur, and if zoning, landscaping, parking, ingress, egress, if all of the applicable standards are met, then our office would issue a building permit, and there would be no Plan Commission review. So council would not need to act on the 59 uses as recommended.
I guess I appreciate the Plan Commission's willingness to come together and put together an impromptu meeting to address developers. We haven't had any issues with that. I guess overall I'm indifferent in the sense that, I do agree. I think it's a good opportunity for the public to be able to speak on the project should there be any concerns or issues. However, every one of the secondary reviews is technically a second review, because the first option, they're still coming to Planning Commission, correct, Kyle? And then the next steps is where there's a secondary review. And majority, or I think most of them in the list, there is no neighborhood notification other than a meeting notice. So the neighbors aren't being advised of that coming to Planning Commission, and unless they were intimately had some knowledge of it or made aware of it some other way.
So you're correct in that right now the noticing requirements are such that they do not need more than an agenda for site plan or plan of operations. However, again, if my recommendation is approved, that means that 59 uses do not need to come to Plan Commission for review. The only review that's occurring is at the staff level.
Shane,
Go ahead, Susan.
it seems to me that somewhere in here there's a compromise. I'm overwhelmed with the 59, and I'm really adamantly opposed to some of the things on this list of 59 being completely circumventing any public exposure, either in the Planning Commission, and if it doesn't go then through the Planning Commission, it goes only to staff. Our minutes go as an approvable item to council. So council becomes aware of that issue at that point. If it goes only to staff, no one sees this except staff. So it's completely opaque to open meeting consideration. That's an issue. I should think, especially if you're dealing with something like, say, a restaurant to me isn't as controversial, but what if you have a funeral home where you have chemicals in use for embalming, you have crematory on site, you may have a fencing issue with regard to parking because most of the visitations are at night, something to that effect. Or some of these other things, I could see the same kind of waste disposal problems with some of the other things on the list here. If you're going to have say an equipment repair, a heavy equipment repair, and you've got considerations for disposal of oil or whatever else you use in that business. I should think that it would be important for surrounding property owners to see the site plan, at least in a public document, so that they could make comment and say, well, could you put that 20 feet this direction, or could you, do something or another? And it's not to say that staff doesn't think about those things, but I don't know that staff or any of us can think about all of those things. And if the public gets no input, I think we're likely to have more unhappy residents.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Go ahead, Jeff.
So Susan, this is Jay. I support this, and I understand what you're saying. I'm just wondering, could we go through this list and see if there's things in here that we could agree on that I guess would help streamline this a little bit as I'm looking at the list. You're right, there are things in here that probably should have a little more review than others, but I mean, is that something that would be reasonable?
Well, I think that's reasonable from my perspective, but I don't know exactly what you do to have that dialogue where you pare it down and make some short, eliminate some things from the list, or have some discussions about those uses that are a little bit more problematic for adjacent property owners.
I think we also have to recognize, and I don't disagree. I mean, there are, in other communities, for example, taverns are conditional use. The uniqueness, I think, with taverns is their late night operations. So if they close at 2 a.m. and they're next to an adjacent residence, well, there can create some incompatible, uses, or some incompatible things in regards to, what neighbors don't want to have in their neighborhood. Multifamily in other communities is a conditional use because of the parking and because of the noise and things of that nature. I think if we pare down the list, if we make the list too small, it may not even be appropriate, right? If the only things we've got in there are retail sales of 10,000 square feet or less, and, restaurants and, instructional services or general office type services, if the list is so small, is it warranted for us to separate them, or should we just, include them and have it be all encompassing then with regards to the review that's necessary? Because I do agree there are some that in this list that, could be controversial. You think of, a worship facility. Most of our worship facilities fall within residential districts. And if one were to expand, you typically have a very high intense use very infrequently. So once or twice a week, you've got hundreds of people attending, and that parking can spill over onto adjacent streets and certainly affect the neighborhood. Same with car sales, right? You can have car sale uses that typically have very bright lights, and those bright lights and the signage could certainly have incompatible characters or an incompatible nature with surrounding properties as well. So, while we can certainly pare this list down, I guess the point I'm making is, if we're going to pare it down so much to only have a few uses, is it really warranted to just, call out only a few uses within the zoning code?
This is Shane. I guess my understanding is you're only looking to do this for things that are permitted by right in these areas, correct? Correct. So I I'm always a fan of the public engagement, but I do see, where it's not a rubber stamp, but it's like our hands are tied, because if everything meets the requirement of the zoning, we can't necessarily control if it, the things, as long as it meets all of the requirements within it, because it's not, necessarily conditional uses where we have more leeway in putting stipulations in and stuff like that. But if it meets the code, then it meets the code. It is permitted by right in that. And if we have concerns by what's permitted and we need to pick that apart, then that's a different ball game of setting things that are conditional.
Yeah, to respond, that is correct. The Plan Commission needs to approach site plan review with caution, especially in approving or denying a site plan review, because again, rights that are permitted in a zoning district, there are some state statute and some legal precedent in regards to those permitted rights. And to deny a use that's permitted by right solely because of the use, likely I would never recommend. But if for example, that applicant didn't meet the parking demand or didn't meet the lighting or wasn't willing to meet those standards in the zoning code, then it would be applicable for the use to be denied. However, as Sue mentioned, the public forum does allow for a common ground to be established. If there is a concern raised by a neighbor, they can raise the concern. The developer then does have an opportunity to respond and may be more willing to go above and beyond the zoning code requirement to address that concern.
Let's just take a look, Kyle, at an example from a few meetings ago where we approved an off-site parking lot behind a business that faced on 8th Street but wanted to have supplemental parking on 7th Street, for instance. And that lot occurred on a corner. And if we were to not have, and there are residential neighbors on at least 2 sides of that, and probably another B zoning to the south of that lot. That developer wanted to ingress and egress on 7th Street, as I recall, but the opportunity existed for an ingress egress to exist also on Miller Avenue. And in that case, if it only went to staff, and there was no public notice to that development there, staff could say, well, sure, let's have ingress egress on the residential Miller Avenue side. And maybe it improves traffic flow on that lot. But on the other hand, it may really be disturbing to the residential property owners, and it would devalue their property to have that happen over there on the residential side. And there would be absolutely no public notice or venue in which those neighbors could have voice. It would be completely out of public view. So those are the kinds of things that I worry about, because in the end, you've got a taxpayer that's maybe been sitting there in the residential neighborhood for decades, paying taxes, being good citizens, and they have no opportunity for public input on that.
Yeah, that's correct.
Commissioners have any other thoughts or comments?
This is Shane again. I guess where I land is I still greatly value the public input. in having that. So I guess I'm in favor of not changing anything.
Thank you, Shane. I guess if kind of a straw poll here that I've kind of been keeping a mental note. I don't know if the commission just wants to not take action, or if the commission wants to make a motion, obviously in the affirmative, to approve the changes, but don't have to vote that way. And then notifying Kyle that the commission does not want to make the changes or make the change. I'm just kind of curious as to what the commission would like to do.
Are you asking for a straw poll here?
Well, I'm sorry, I mentally was taking a straw poll, but I'm not asking for one. I'm just asking if the commission wishes to take action or through a motion on the item, or if we're not ready to do that, and the commission wants to hold it over for potentially more information, which I don't think there probably is any needed for any more information. So I guess my thought would be is if we make a motion, whether or not to approve it or not, and then go on from there. Or unless somebody else has another thought.
Well, my only other thought is that you go through the list piece by piece and come to some determination about, well, what is the percentage of things that you would leave on that list, and what is the percentage of things that you would take off that list?
I personally, I think, yeah, I'm going through the list here as we were talking, and there's a number of things I would probably, a vast number of things I'd probably leave on the list to continue to have plan commission review. I think my list to continue the review would be greater than not, looking at a lot of these items. And so if the commission wants to go through each item, we can do that even at another meeting, or we can address this, or we can address it now, or we can take action now.
Mayor,
Yes, go ahead.
so can we give this a month? I would make a motion to bring this back next month.
To hold it over.
So we'll just over, yeah.
And then, okay, so we have a motion by Bemke to hold this item over a month.
I'll second it.
We have a second by Feith. Go ahead, Kyle.
Is there any instruction for staff in regards to how we can assist to provide more information, or maybe try to pare this down a little bit based on the conversation, or draft language that, again, would allow staff maybe to approve additions or renovations to existing uses? I just want to make sure that if there's anything staff can do to aid in the conversation, that we're on track to do that. Otherwise, if it's just frankly to bring the list back to discuss it at a future date with staff doing nothing, then I'm fine with that as well.
I would like everybody just to have an opportunity to look at the list for a month, and if this comes back and it's not worth our time, then we can put the issue to rest in a month.
Does that sound good with the rest of the commission? So we do have a motion to hold it over a month in a second. And during that month, you can think about the list and we can talk about it in a month and then come to some resolution.
Shane, question. What happens in terms of our, would there be any value in individual commissioners offering up comment on the list, or reorganizing the list and giving it to Kyle for compilation for the next meeting?
Yeah, I would think that would be a good idea if you have any questions or comments or concerns on items on those lists to reach out to Kyle.
Okay.
So we do have a motion and a second to hold us over for a month. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? So that motion carries. We're to item 4, to adjourn. I just want to thank everybody for attending virtually. I hope you have a great holiday season and a healthy one. And we're to our last item of adjournment. We have a motion by Bemke. I'll second it by Blazer. All in favor say aye.
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 Thank you.
Anybody opposed? Okay. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.